We finished off at Stonehenge, had one last look, shown Polly the stones, and then we decided it was time to move on. The next place that was on our menu was Up Pottery. I wanted to continue with the story that we were following in the sidelines, which was the Band of Brothers story, so we decided that Up Pottery wasn't too far a drive for us, so we headed out into that direction. I'm here at Up Pottery Airfield. This is where the Band of Brothers started their journey when they went into Germany. It all began here. All their training at Toccoa, over in America, all crystallised to this point here, where the Easy Company and the 506 started from Up Pottery Airfield, where they took off in June 1944. Unfortunately, the airfield museum is closed because of COVID, but we wanted to come here anyway and just have a look at the aerodrome before we started backtracking towards the villages and some of the places where they did some of their final training in the UK before they flew out. The first night was cancelled due to rain, fog over the drop zone. The weather was just not good enough for the massive invasion that was going to take place, so D-Day was actually scheduled for the 5th of June, but eventually it did take place on the 6th of June when they all went, and this is where they went from. There's a few buildings left, a couple of Nissan huts there have been used for the museum, and there's a few little bits there. You can see the troop emblems there, the AA, which stands for Airborne Assault, and obviously the Screaming Eagle, which was you know, well known obviously for Easy Company, which was shoulder patches, and AA was Airborne Assault, and that was for the 82nd, because this was the 101st Airborne. I parked up to take a few photographs of the runway, and a gentleman who actually owned the property, owned the whole airfield, invited us to take a drive along the runway, and this was an offer that I just didn't want to pass up on. So we jumped in the van and we set off and drove along the runway, the very same strip that these aircraft took off from all those years ago. I tried to picture how it must have felt to them as they went across and then finally lost touch with the airfield and headed towards France to embark on this journey. It was nice, it was a great feeling. You felt like you were walking in somebody's footsteps, and it was a great honour to do that. It's time for us to say farewell to Up Pottery. This is the memorial that they put here to the aerodrome when it was opened and closed. Opened in 1944 and closed in 1948, so a relatively quite a short history, but a very important part of history when you look at what went on here. From these aircraft taking off, it actually was the start of the liberation of Europe, and actually the start of everything that we know now and hold dear. It was the start of that, so we wouldn't have it if it wasn't for these guys. So as we drove along the runway earlier, we just pictured in ourselves, we were happy and to get a feel of history there, but feeling for those guys who were actually in the aircraft going across there. Many of them didn't return. It was their last flight, their last journey, everything, but they still did it for us. So of that we're eternally grateful. So there it is. history for us. We're off to Bridport, where me and Tracy spent some great times when we had our LDV. So we're going to leave a windy up Pottery and head down for hopefully a sunny and sheltered Bridport. The first time we visited Bridport, the weather was perfect, and we introduced ourselves to various pastimes, a bit of sea fishing, sightseeing, and also we've managed to make some friends down there at the same time as well, so we had some quite lazy days by the beach as well. Tracy caught a humongous crab, spider crab, and I caught a turbot, but it wasn't large enough to take away, so we released that back into the water. The weather did not stay with us, and as you can see, it changed. When I parked up, I looked another van across and thought, hang on, that looks a bit similar to mine, and on a closer inspection it is really quite similar. It's notorious for its history from World War II, as a lot of the southern coast region is. The day we arrived, it was quite windy, and the birds were riding the wind and just hovering above the waves. So we didn't bother with a long beach walk. We just thought we'd stand and sort of gaze and chat about a few little memories. Had a look around the harbour area, and saw a rather unfortunate cormorant who was getting hounded by a few gulls, but we decided that what we'd probably do is we wouldn't stick around, because a lot of it was all closed down for the year and it wasn't great weather. So, but we were glad that we'd visited, and we'd had a little stomp up memory lane and seen Bridport again, so we could sort of notch it in our diary and say we've been. The next place that we visited was Marlborough, a beautiful place, and full of different architecture from all different times. All put together, a historic sort of market town, and some nice little features as you walk up and down the town, ranging from obviously the different shaped buildings to the stone walls, and obviously previous enclosures and stuff like that, which have been left, you know, which mark the test of time. We went to the church, which had a famous little backstory to it as well. It was used for a cafe when we went there, and apparently this was what was saving it as well. It was keeping a regular income going in, but it was also where Cardinal Wolsey was ordained as well. So we had a little look around, and we saw there was a burial cart left over from the Victorian era. There was a small bust of Cardinal Wolsey, and also here it told the story of a family which had been taken by the plague in the 1600s, and we had a close look because I quite like the old spelling and to see how the language has developed over the centuries. But the altar was still there, and the beautiful stained glass windows are all there for you to sit and look at while you enjoy a nice hot drink, and if you can be tempted into some of their desserts, I would definitely recommend it. I went for a very traditional treacle sponge topped with ice cream, and yeah, it was quite spectacular, as you can see. We went to a cafe which was named after Polly, bless her. And the waiter came outside and made a big fuss of her as well. But they had the most amazing cakes, meringues and everything available. But fortunately we'd had some cake earlier on, so we didn't indulge. It was time to move on, and we found a place to stay, a lovely little country pub. The details are at the end of the film if you want to visit these places, but he will let you stay in the car park overnight if you have a meal and a drink inside, and it was beautiful inside, and the food was excellent, and the staff were friendly. Tracy had liver and bacon with mash and gravy, and I, again, adventurous as ever, went for the old burger and chips.
following day, because the weather had drawn in quite a lot, we decided to go out, and I wanted to visit a place called Alton, which tells the story of Fanny Adams. She was brutally murdered in the mid 1800s, and I wanted to visit the graveyard where she was buried, just to have a look and to pay my respects, because her death was resonated throughout the Victorian community. When she was buried, the Victorians actually put together to give her a suitable gravestone, because obviously they were quite an expensive undertaking in those days. But when I walked onto the graveyard, I looked across and you could see straight away it stood out like a small beacon, and there it was, white against the green, the grave of Fanny Adams. I'm guessing is the gravestone that her family could afford, but obviously was later replaced by the Victorians that put some money together, because they were so shocked about her demise. And if you look at the soil there, you can see it's actually worn away. So well over 100 years later, 150 years later, people are still visiting. Frederick Baker, who was responsible for her murder, who was a clerk to a solicitor, was taken to Winchester and hanged. And now you know where the saying comes from when people say Sweet Fanny Adams, or shortened down Sweet FA, came from this little lady. As we made our way back, we pulled into another little spot for some lunch, and Holly was letting off a bit of steam because we couldn't really go out and do a lot of walking because of the rain. So we parked up next to RAF Odeon, where the Chinook is based, and that's Tracy's favourite helicopter. So we pulled in there for a bite to eat and just to see if we could spot anything happening, if anything was going to be airborne at all.
Get on.
Now we did see some rotor blades, and that's about as exciting as that was going to get when it came to the helicopter itself. But when we parked up and looked out, the fire service decided to do a practice, and this is where they torch basically a fuselage of a scrapped helicopter, and then they will go through their drills then to practice putting it out, and the rescue situation, see how quick they can get on the job, for want of a better phrase. I'm presuming this is something that the fire crews carry out on a regular basis. The next journey was Aldbourne, and this is where the 101st did some of their training, and they were billeted in Aldbourne. It's a quiet country village, not too far from Highclere House, and the post office there is where Lieutenant Winters stayed when he was in charge of Easy Company. The church in the background is where Lieutenant Spears got married, and there he is outside with the lads. And some of these streets, when you look at them, you can picture the boys walking up and down as they made their way to and from. And there was a poster where it would list who stayed and where their addresses were. And there's one of the key characters there, Sergeant Don Malarkey, who later got a battlefield commission. The pub, the Crown, which was a command post for the 101st, and it was blue plaqued as well, which I thought was good. There's some of the characters as well, which you may recognise from the Band of Brothers film, and that's the original guys. the men that did it. But it was good, lovely little village, plenty of history, and a lovely place to visit as well. Herbert Sobel was the man who trained the Easy Company, who was a hard line, and although he was not well liked amongst the men, on reflection they did say that a lot of them owed their lives to Captain Sobel. We returned to Fairford. We went for a meal in a pub called the Bull, a beautiful hotel which you can stay at. And it was all, because of COVID, it was all waiter service, so you remained at the table. I was adventurous again and decided on the burger and chips. And Tracy went for pie. She was also being selectively adventurous as well. And then she went for pumpkin dessert, or pumpkin pie or something. But the main reason we wanted to go was to visit the church at Fairford. It's a really nice place to visit. There's a mill with the water running through, and it does attract a lot of wildlife as well, as water always does. You can get amazing species of birds just hanging around the area or around the marshes and stuff like that. So we had a look in the graveyard and read a few stones and stuff like that, but what I really wanted to do was to go inside and to visit the church and have a look at the stained glass windows that were inside. Interesting gargoyles. As you can see, I think. Outside the church you could see the different gargoyles that had been put up there. Great architecture. So inside it is notable for the 28 medieval stained glass windows, which are some of the best that's been preserved in England. The tower dates from the 15th century. The church was rebuilt at the end of the 15th century by John Tame, and he was a wealthy local wool merchant. Well, what I did notice is, I haven't seen it in churches before, but the great window that you can see there in Fairford Church depicts the Last Judgment and the related scenes. Good and evil is depicted in these. That's where we parked up, just near the church. It's free parking as well, so you can walk into the town. There's a lovely array of different nature and stuff like that that surrounds you, all looking around for little bits and bobs. There's a missel thrush just seeing off a blackbird there. Then we parked up in Lechlade and we went to a caravan park which was run by a farmer and his wife, and it's surrounded by some beautiful woodland, and it's also on the flight path for Fairford as well, the American Air Base. So we let Polly let off a little bit of steam. She had a bit of sprinting up and down, and a bit of play for her, which is always good because she likes to have a little stomp about. She doesn't always like to give the ball back though, but she can be coaxed or captured. The place was quite waterlogged, so we stuck to the little limestone path that brought us in, and kept Polly sort of in that area, because if we ventured into the middle of the field you can actually hear the water as you stomped across it. Like I say, the caravan park is surrounded by some beautiful lakes with some lovely nature across it as well, different bird life and aquatic bird life as well that's living there, and I suppose any time of year it'll be a good walk. This was the walk that took you into the town, where we went and got a few little provisions, treated ourselves to a nice cooked breakfast under the watchful guise of Polly, who also liked to assist Tracy with the tucking away of certain alcoholic beverages.
Sweet sherry booby.
Every drop, nothing wasted. Lots of wildlife around us. We had one little last trip back to Bryce before we decided to make the journey back, so we watched the Voyager come in. We had a look at the aircraft all parked up, from the 400M to the C-17s, and we enjoyed it because there was birds to be seen, there was aircraft to be seen as well, so it's been a really nice break. And our visit to Wiltshire, although a lot of it was based on a military side of things, it was still really interesting for us, and they are definitely campervan friendly people in the county of Wiltshire, and we will definitely be returning.